Shalom, shalom. Want to give all honor and glory to Yahweh Shem Yahushai. It's brought all of y'all with the servants. All right. And we got another truth revealing Tuesday coming up, man. Our praise Most High. And we're going to unraveling the Roman Empire. Unraveling the Roman Empire. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get some scriptures. So we're gonna do a recap also from what we went into prior to a couple of videos ago, going into the rise of the Roman Empire from the Roman Republic and then transitioning to the Roman Empire. So now what we're gonna go and we're gonna do a recap on that, and then we're gonna go to the transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. So let's go ahead and get some precepts first. So let's start off with this real quick. My screen should be sharing. Make sure that's showing. All right, let's go to Sirach. We're going to Sirach 5 and 15. Let's go to that. Make sure. This is the book of Sirach, chapter 5, verse 15. It says, "Be not ignorant of anything in a great or small matter." And the reason why we want to bring out this is you don't want to be ignorant of the history. Right? Think about this. When you think about history and the Israelites, all of it goes hand to hand. When we see the downfall of the Roman Empire, the downfall of the Grecian Empire, you see the rise of the Roman Empire, and then you see the different parts right through history, as in when Yahweh Shah was on the scene, who were ignorantly called Jesus Christ, when he was on the scene, who was in rulership during those times, when it also goes into prophecy as well. To understand prophecy, you got to understand history. Because prophecy and history goes hand in hand. Because there are certain things that the Lord has prophesied would happen, and that those things that the Lord prophesied would happen, they are now a part of history. You know, also with that being said, you also can understand the different dreams that for instance, with Daniel, in the book of Daniel, when you got those beasts. When you got that statue with the gold, the silver, and so forth, with Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Understanding that, but you gotta understand what those things mean. You have to understand history. Okay. And just a brief synopsis, we're gonna go to the book of Daniel, chapter 2. Okay. Gonna go Daniel chapter 2, and we're gonna go to this. It says, "In the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron." This Daniel chapter 2 and verse 40. "In the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these shall it break in pieces and bruise." So this thing says it shall subdue all things. So when you go into the rise of the Romans, you have to understand they was constantly going to war with these many different nations. They was going to war with the Carthaginians. They was going to war with the Grecians, with the early inhabitants of Spain. So they had a lot going on, and they were subduing all these nations. So that's why you had the Roman expansion, and then that's also when you read this. Let's go to this precept. And First Maccabees chapter 8 and verse 1. Let's go to this. Now Judas, this First Maccabees 8 and 1 says, "Now Judas had heard of the Romans that they were mighty and valiant men, and such as would lovingly accept all that joined themselves unto them, and make a league and enmity with all that came unto them." So it says they were mighty. And how were they seen as mighty? Because all the wars. So Judas Maccabees, He heard all the wars, all the expanding that the Romans were doing. Let me pull up the whole chapter. It says in that they were men of great valor, it was told him also of their wars and noble acts. So we're just gonna again, we're not gonna go in detail as much with all the different wars, but we're just gonna do like a recap again of how they came into power, how the Romans came into power. So let's get this article I got here. All right, so this is on timesmap.com. Okay, so it says the rise of the Roman Empire. Again, we just gonna go briefly into this. So what we're gonna start off is because you got to understand before there was a Roman Empire, you had the Roman Republic. Okay, so it says the rise of the Roman Empire can be traced back to Italy in the 8th century. So this is going to the Roman Empire, but we're going to keep going because it says before you get to there, we're going to jump right here to the early Republic. But I'm gonna read this first, and then we're going to jump down. It says this was a period of culture change when the life of the peoples of Central Italy was beginning to be affected by new influences from from Eastern Mediterranean. Okay, so we're gonna jump down and we're gonna get into the history prior to that. So let's go to this. We're gonna go to this right here. It says this is it says from village cluster to city state. So it's a village. At first, it was a cluster of villages. Then it became a city state. One such community affected by these changes was that of the Romans. They originally inhabited a cluster of villages on a group of hills in northern Latium at a well-trodden crossing point of the river Tiber. The Romans were not, in fact, typical of the usual Latin communities, in that from an early date they seem to have been a mix of Latins and Sabines, a more pastoral people who lived in the hills east of Latium. Sometime in the century 700 BC, these farmers merged their villages together to form a city state. So that's what ended up happening. And very soon, their location at a strategic crossing point on the river Tiber, 12 miles or so from its mouth, attracted the attention of their powerful Etruscan neighbors to the north. Etruscan lords came down and took control of the city, probably shortly around 600 BC, and gave the city a line of kings. These kings, the Tarquini, who according to legend were descended from the kings of Corinth and Greece, embellished the city with walls, a central forum, public square. So now you see the actual before what you see now. It started off with farmers. It started off with just like I said, just villages, and then they end up merging together. So along that, right, you go down to the early republic. So that's when you start to form it started to be as you call Rome. It says the early republic, and it says the early history of the Roman Republic was one of fierce external pressure, accompanied by sharp intent, sharp internal tensions. The Romans' triumph over both these challenges laid the foundations for future greatness, and also to add, the word Rome came from Romulus. There's a dude named Romulus. He was one of the chief people, and they ended up calling it. Rome ended up being called after him, a guy named Romulus. I did want to add that in there, but keep going. It says threats without tension. So again, we're not gonna go deep into it, but we just kind of bounce around so you can see what was going on. So you said you got it says with the expulsion of the last king, Tarquin the proud, the Romans immediately found themselves fighting for their lives. Tarquin and his Etruscan allies organized a, a coordinated attack on them, and hill tribes such as the Sabines and Volsci raided their territory. The Romans beat off these attacks, but From now on, they were continually at war with their neighbors, Latin, Sabine, Volscian, and Etruscan. So it's telling you they was constantly at war. So you see the time period right here. This is Tarquinius Superbus, the seventh king of Rome, reigning from 535 B until Roman revolt in 509 BC. So you see what was going on, and you see how they started off. Okay, so we further go down to, and again it always tells that it was constantly at war, and that matches up again with the prophecy where it says it's going to subdue all things, and we're seeing the path of the Romans subduing all these nations around them. So I'm gonna go right here. It says in 406 BC, after a fierce 10-year war with Veii, her nearest Etruscan neighbor, only 10 miles away, she was victorious and destroyed the city. At one stroke, Roman territory almost doubled in size. So we're seeing they start off again of villages to a city state. Now the Romans are expanding. And so again, when we read the book of First Maccabees chapter 8, the things that Judas heard is what we're reading. He heard about how they expanded, how they grew, how they became a mighty nation. And you guys on King that this you already know.
Come on, cook.
God says at once, it said the Romans settled their own citizens on the land that had belonged to the enemy. This put her in an even stronger position with her neighbors. So we're seeing again this beast, this not this beast, but this nation start to grow. It says, then disaster struck a powerful raiding party of Gauls, who the Greeks called Celtor or Celts, coming down the Italian peninsula from northern Italy, defeated the Roman army and burnt the city, narrowly failing to take the citadel and destroy the city altogether. So they had a point where they got weakened, I would say. They got weakened as a nation with this when they went against the Celts. But they didn't stop there. They didn't they bounced back. The Romans bounced back. They was very resilient. The Romans were very resilient. They ended up bouncing back. So you have these different tensions and things that was going on. So you have what you have the Middle Republic. So you had the Middle, you had the Roman Republic. Now you have what you call the Middle Republic. So this we just gonna briefly go over the Middle Republic. Expansion in Italy, having overcome severe early challenges and setbacks, the Romans went on to defeat many tough enemies to conquer Italy. They did this not only by dogged determination in war, but also by Judas and far-sighted treatment of beaten opponents. And you think about this again, it said the termination of war. You gotta think about this too. Esau, that's a part of his blessing. Let me go to that real fast. We have to understand the nature of Esau. So when you see his rulership, when you see how he ended up gaining power, ruling over all these nations, you gotta understand it all has to do with his blessing. So let's go to Genesis chapter 27, and we're gonna start at verse. We're gonna start at this right here. It says, Esau heard the word. We're gonna start at 34. Genesis 27, 34, 34. And when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry, and said unto his father, bless me, even me also, O my father. And he said, thy brother came with subtlety and have taken away thy blessing. And he said, it is not he rightly named Jacob, for he has supplanted me though these two times, and took away my birthright. And we know through the scriptures that Esau gave up his blessing. He gave up his birthright for pottage. For pottage. So, anyway, he says, and behold, now he have taken away my blessing, and he said, has now reserved a blessing for me. And also this relates to the precept in Hebrews chapter 12 and 16. He saw that carefully too. Crying. Esau crying out. So let's keep going. It says this. I'm gonna jump down. I'm gonna jump down to verse 39. It says, and Isaac, his father, answered, said to him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above, and by thy sword shalt thou live. So it says we gotta take that. Let's deal with that. It says, by thy sword shalt thou live. And that's how Esau get his living. That's how Esau has gotten to the state, right, to where they are now. All off that sword, all off this blessing. Every nation they, because they have these many different names. They the Greeks, the Russians, the Amalek. All of them have this one thing in common. The Americans all had this one thing in common: that sword. Conquer many nations. And that's the blessing that Isaac said that he was going to receive. His dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth. And how was he going to get that? How he was going to have the dew of heaven from above? How? By the sword, by going to war, by destroying many nations and people. And that's what they have done for millennia, hundreds of years. It's all been doing. That's in their nature. That's in the blessing that was given to them in a time of old. And it says, and shall serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion. So we're going into the history of how Esau got the dominion. And when you look at what happened to the Roman Republic, and you can see how they got dominion during that time, you better understand how they continue to have dominion to this day. So let's go back to what we was reading at. So it says this, Latium and Campania. So again, we're not gonna read every single thing, so we're gonna jump down for the sake of time. So along these things, you have the Samnite Wars. So we just gonna read briefly about the Samnite Wars, and we're gonna keep it going. Rome was now able to call on a large pool of military manpower, which she was to need over the next few decades, as we have seen her new allies in the fertile coastal plain of Campania had been coming under pressure from the hill tribes of the interior. The Samnites and their allies, these had a reputation as tough fighters. The Romans were obliged to come to the assistance of their allies and had to endure long years of warfare in the hills and mountains of central and southern Italy, 326 to 90 BC. So we had 300 BC. So we seen boom, five from 600 BC they've been going to war, 300 BC they still going to war, right? And now you see as they was growing to power, they a part of them growing to power was them always having allies. And when we think about that, that's when you read the book of when you read what we just read in Second Maccabees chapter 8, they still had that same spirit. They was doing this in 300 BC. So around the time of Judas Maccabees, they still had that same spirit of they try to bring people in as allies, and that's a part of their strategy in gaining power. So let's keep going. We're going it says they experienced some disastrous defeats, but eventually they were able to prevail. Whilst dealing with these difficult foes, they also secured their rear and north by subduing the Etruscan cities. So they end up subduing the Etruscan cities. And what did it say in the book of Second Daniel? It said they will subdue all things. So here we seeing them what? Subduing the Etruscans. So we keep going. We keep going down. So you got Rome against Pyrrhus. So you got Rome against Pyrrhus.
Mhm.
Now these, when you start talking about this, then we start going into them going to war with the Grecians. So I'm gonna just read through this. It says, in this way, the Romans constructed a federation of Italian states with varying degrees of closeness to her, from those brought lock stake and barrel into her fold to those who were merely her allies. All states had their place, their own individual relationship to the leading city. And as time was to prove, the system was to prove a resilient and enduring one. Her allies provided Rome with the manpower to defend herself and her allies against new former opponents and extend her sway. So again, that's why I say a part of their strategy, how they came into power, they was using their allies.
Right.
They was getting in with the many nations that was around them, and they end up building their power so it can defend itself, take out these different allies. And one of the allies they end up getting into with was the Grecians. Says the next opponent was indeed formidable. The Greek cities of southern Italy, alarmed at the growing power of Rome, called Pyrrhus king of the northern Greek kingdom of Epirus, reigned from 307 to 272 BCE. And I'm gonna read this last point. I'm gonna read to this period right here. Then we're gonna keep going. To come to their aid and safeguard their independence, Pyrrhus was one of the most famous Greek generals since Alexander the Great. He was famous. He was infamous. So now you jump down. So now you get into what? The Great Punic Wars. When the Romans was going against Carthage. And this is where you get names like hold on, before let me keep reading first. It says this. The first Punic War. Now we're not gonna read everything. We're just gonna read a few things on it. It says
Right.
huh?
Now I was saying, right, we're not gonna go into all of it.
Yeah. Carthage was at the time the leading maritime power in Western Mediterranean. She was determined to keep this position. So when tension arose in Sicily, withdrew the Romans, and the clash between two powers became inevitable. Which followed these was two conflicts, which were the ancient world's equivalents. It was equivalent in the ancient world. These wars was equivalent to world wars in the 20th century. That's how big it was. It was equivalent to the World War, World War I, World War II. That's how big the Punic War was. So you had the first Punic War, which was from 264 to 241 BC. Okay, then you got things. This is where Hannibal comes into play. So you end up reading about Hannibal. The Romans end up overtaking Hannibal. They end up taking over Spain, so forth and so forth. Okay, you got the Second Punic War. Okay, and then you got the victory. They end up having the Romans end up taking victory over the Carthaginians, and then you had the West. So you had Western Rome, you had Eastern Rome. You had it was again. This is a time where they was expanding. So now you have this time period right here. This is closer to the time of Maccabees. It says, meanwhile, this is closer to the time when you read in First Maccabees, Second Maccabees. It's close to the time of the Hasmonean dynasty, close to that time period. It says, meanwhile, Roman armies had become involved in eastern Mediterranean. The conflicts between Greek and Hellenistic states drew the new power inexorably into their tangled affairs. Macedonia, which dominated Greece, and when you go into that, there are four different the Macedonian wars. There's four different Macedonian wars, and you read about that, and that's when the Romans and the Greeks was going back to back, war for war, war for war, war for war. It was a lot going on. So we just gonna read it just briefly. So I'm gonna jump down. So it says, after Zama, Roman involvement was expanded to the point where, after defeating the Macedonian army at the Battle of Cynoscephalae, Rome restricted Macedonia's hold to the south by liberating the Greek city-states from interference. Antiochus. So you read about Antiochus. We read about Antiochus and where First Maccabees, king of the Seleucid kingdom, because we know that after Alexander the Great, after he was unalive, his kingdom broke up, and that's when you hear about these different names: Ptolemy, Antiochus, or Antiochus, however you want to pronounce his name. So you hear about what the Romans going to war with them. It says they then invaded Greece to prevent further Roman involvement, which of course had exactly the opposite effect by bringing the Romans to the region again and driving him back into Asia. Battle of Magnesia at 190. A new king of Macedonia, Perseus. We talked about this the videos before. We talked about Perseus, and also you'll hear about that in First Maccabees chapter 8, which we're gonna end up getting. We're gonna end up getting after I get to this period. So it says, then decided to try his luck against the Romans, but after some initial success, he too was defeated at the Battle of Pydna, which was a very very important battle. And it says 168 BC, and his kingdom divided into 4 weak republics, all allied to Rome. Again, Roman forces withdrew. Finally, a widespread revolt against the Roman-sponsored regimes in Macedonia and Greece resulted in the destruction of the historic city of Corinth, the establishment of permanent Roman rule in the region. So now you see about the permanent Roman rule in the region. After they had destroyed Corinth, that was it. They came out on top. Okay, so I just want to read this scripture where we was at. So, and when we read this scripture, we're going to see the different things that we talked about. So let's go to First Maccabees 8:2. It says, and that they were men of great valor. It was told him also of their wars and noble acts which they had done among the Galatians, and how they had conquered them and brought them under tribute, and what they had done in the country of Spain. We just talked about that, the Carthage wars and things like that. Those, it was different wars that they got in that region. That's when they got Spain for the winning of the mines of the silver and gold which is there. I'm gonna jump down to verse. I'm gonna keep reading. It says, and that by their policy and patience they had conquered all the place. That policy and patience, though it were very far from them, and the kings also that came against them from the uttermost part of the earth. We're seeing as we're reading, we talking about these different wars. We are seeing how this actually played out. It's showing you in the scriptures what was going on. This is the information that Judas knew. He knew about all these different wars. They told him. He said he heard about these wars that the Romans had gotten into.
Right. And just to make a quick point, all this stuff that Judas Maccabees and them are learning about in this chapter right here, this was all while Rome was still a republic. They were called the Roman Republic during this time. And during this time, the Roman Republic came into power and was established during 509 BC. So it's important to know that when you're reading about this chapter in First Maccabees chapter 8, this is not when Rome was an empire. This was the beginning and reign of Rome being a republic. And at this time, Rome really became a republic during the time of the Persian and Mede Empire. This is when Rome became a republic, and this when they was making a name for themselves. So during the time when the Greeks had took over the Persian and Medes and all their provinces, Rome was also on the rise as well. And that's why, as we read about when Alexander passed his 4 generals along, later on in that, when we read in this chapter, you learn about Rome and Greece now clashing and going at each other because they were battling for power. Real quick, can get the book of Psalms, chapter 37, and verse number 25. So it's important to understand that when you reading this, you know the times and the eras and what was the status of these nations when we reading these things. So during First Maccabees chapter 8, when Judas and the brethren of the Israelites made a league with Rome at that time, because we was going at the Greeks. This was during the Roman Republic era, not the Roman Empire era. So read that.
God, Psalms 37:25. I have been young.
No,
And
36 and 25. Proverbs 37. Hold on. I could have sworn.
what it was saying.
Just give me Sirach 10 or 4. I'll come back to that one.
Okay. Sirach 10. Let me go to this other page. Book of Sirach 10. Sirach 10 and 1.
Verse 4.
Sirach 10 and 4. Con. The book of Sirach, chapter 10, and verse number 4.
Uh-huh.
And it reads, the power of the earth is in the hand of the Lord,
Right.
and in due time he will set over it one that is profitable.
So during this time, when you going through this history, when we seeing understanding how the Greeks took over the Persian and Mede Empire, and now we reading about in First Maccabees chapter 8, how they was hearing about the rise of the Romans, it was of the Lord to fulfill the words that Daniel had spoken. But during this time, this was during the time of the Roman Republic, and it was Psalms 37 and 35. I had said 25, I meant 35. So when you look at this, this is all of the Lord's doing. And also, what we're going to learn about as we keep on reading, Ezra also declared a prophecy concerning this fourth beast. That fourth beast that he will be prophesying about, that's Ezra prophesying about the Roman Empire. But right now, what we're reading, this is us learning about how Rome got popular during the time of its Republic era. So let's get that.
The book of Psalms, chapter 37, verse 35. I have seen the wicked in great power.
So even King David, through the Spirit, is saying he's seen the wicked in great power. We know the most wicked nation on earth is Esau. So looking at it through the ends of Judah Maccabees and them, they're seeing the great power that these wicked nations have and these wicked nations possess, like the Romans. And as we are reading, they are learning how, hey, everywhere these folks set their feet on land to go to war with, they overcame them, they conquered them, just like how Daniel said they would. All right, come on.
And spreading himself like a green bay tree.
And during this time, when kings and wicked men set themselves up on the earth, they will conquer other people and they will spread their power along the world or the land masses at that time like green bay trees. So one more time, let's get the book of Daniel chapter 7. And then I want to get let me see, verse 7.
7. Daniel chapter 7, verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth.
Mm-hmm.
It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it.
All right, so when you look at this, and now when you go back to this in First Maccabees chapter 8, this is letting you know, and this is how powerful how this beast was going to be different, because Greeks had their time, and after a while they got overthrown by the Romans. The Persian and Mede had their time, but eventually they got overthrown by the Grecians. Right, the Babylonians had their time, but then they soon got overthrown by the Persians and the Medes. So when you look at this, what made the Romans more different and what made this fourth beast more different is because they had different stages of them dominating the entire world, right? It started off with as the Roman kingdom. Then from the Roman kingdom, it became the Roman Republic in 509. Then it eventually came to the Roman Empire. And that's what we in the process of going through right now. We're showing the wars during the Roman Republic that established them and eventually led to them becoming an empire, which you will learn about in the book of Second Ezra chapter 12. So I just wanted to bring that out to let it be known. Like when you read First Maccabees 8, it's not talking about the Roman Empire, it's talking about the Republic. But go ahead, bro. You got it.
Con, con. That's right. So let's keep going. So it says again, Roman forces with Salakia. Oh yeah. Fast forward. Before I go back there, I'm gonna finish on what I was at. And on this precept right here first. It says and it says verse 5, First Maccabees 8 and 5. Beside this, how they had discomfited in battle Philip and Perseus, king of the Sidonians, with others that lifted up themselves against them and had overcome them, how also Antiochus, the great king of Asia, that came against them in battle, having 120 elephants with horsemen and chariots and a very great army, was discomfited by them. So you end up hearing it says, and how they took him alive and covenanted that he and such as reigned after him should pay a great tribute and give hostages in that which was agreed upon in the country of India and Media and Lydia and of the goodliest countries which they took of him and gave to King Immunes. So with this being said, you hear about this, and this is us reading it. This right here. It says in this thing here, we're reading. We went. That's the scriptures, and that's showing you what they seen. Now we're going and lining it up with history. It says finally, a widespread revolt against the Roman-sponsored regimes in Macedonia and Greece resulted in the destruction. Oh, we read that. So you got Carthage again. They end up going to get Carthage again. So now you got the later republic. So while Romans were, while Romans were conquering all around the Mediterranean, things had been going from bad to worse within the city embodied politic of Rome itself. So now you're going through, you had different things going on. Rome is expanding, but it had things going on on a social level, on a political level. This is what you had going on. So it says this. I'm gonna just read it again. Now, understanding this is gonna understand why it ended up being from the Roman Republic to becoming the Roman Empire. The influx of booty and tribute, which is booty and spoils, from the conquest created a class of extremely rich Roman senators who were sent to the wars as generals and governors and businessmen, equestrians who farmed the taxes of new provinces and provisioned the armies. Above all, each new victory brought in thousands of slaves. So these men was the Romans. They was expanding. They was taxing. They had slaves. They had a lot going on. During the last 2 centuries BC, the Mediterranean slave trade made an enormous business, with Rome and Italy being the main destination markets. During this period, Roman society became a slave-based society than any other before or since in history. And think about this too. You already know who was one of the on the market. You know he was on the market. You know the Israelites was on the market. So again, you had all this going on. They had slaves, they had this, they had that. So you got murders, politics, military changes, military setbacks. So all these different things you got going on. It says professional, ambitious generals, war with allies, Marius versus Sulla. These are the things that was going on. So now we go into the fall of the Republic. So now you got the fall of the Republic. Again, all these things are going on, and this end up coming to the fall. This is the fall. It says The middle years of the first century BC were dominated by the careers of two powerful generals, Pompey and Pompey the Great and Julius Caesar. Okay, their conquests and maneuverings set the stage for the final fall of the Republic. So now we go into the fall of the Republic, the rise of Pompey. So you got the rise of Pompey, and this is the rise of Pompey correlates with the falling of the Republic. It says by the time of Sulla's retirement, another general was making his mark, Gaius Pompeius Pompey. After another civil war between Roman forces, but this time in Spain rather than in Italy, Pompey with difficulty defeated Sertorius, one of Marius' supporters who had been governing Spain as a virtually independent ruler for several years. Meanwhile, in 73, a slave revolts broke out in southern Italy. This was not the first of such revolts, but it was the first one to start on the Italian mainland rather than on inland of Sicily. The rise of great slave run estates in southern Italy and Sicily, with chain gangs of men working in the most appalling conditions, had created conditions ripe for violent uprisings. So you have uprisings going on, and you can, and it's the crazy. This is how you know these are the same people. They do the same thing. They mod they chain gang out the prison. They been doing this though. Have people work in the most appalling conditions. You look at the same thing now. And this how we know who the so-called white. We know these same people. They the same people. They carry on the same tactics they did back then. And they still carry on to this day. When you think about the prison system, it actually funds, it's actually is a business. They make money off from prison. Millions of dollars off prisons. Same thing. So it says, as well as being the first to break out on the mainland, this was by far the most dangerous of the slave revolts under the leadership of an energetic and charismatic gladiator called Spartacus. A king, if I'm not wrong, who was Spartacus? Was Spartacus the Israelite?
Con.
Con. So we check this out. Check this out, man. And you know, and this is the thing. This how you know. It said he was a slave. And what was our? You gotta think about this. We was under tribute during the Grecians. They sold us. They were selling slaves. The Grecians was, and the Romans was too. And the reason why we was end up being slave, why? Because we broke the commandments of God. But anyways, it says it posed a serious threat to order life in the area. Roman forces sent against the slaves were defeated, and the revolt spread over a wider and wider area. And it was like this. Spartacus was like another Nat Turner. As the slave army marched northward, Rome itself began to feel threatened. So you got this. You had slave revolts. These things was going on. So let's keep going. It says again. Now it's got Pompey in the east. A little later, Pompey was given the supreme command against pirates who, in the chaos of the preceding decades, had established themselves throughout the eastern Mediterranean and had come to pose a grave menace to merchant shipping on which Rome increasingly depended to feed its growing population. He achieved this in short order and was appointed to supreme command in the east. Check this out. Where he finally eliminated King Mithrax and brought hold of Asia Minor, Syria, and Judea under Rome control. Check that out. It says he divided the conquered territories between provinces under Rome's direct rule. On the one hand, client kingdoms under their own kings, the best known being the family of Herod in Judea. So check this out. Now we seeing you hear about now you hear about Herod coming in the picture, and this is after the Hasmonean dynasty, because you know that you had the Hasmonean dynasty, the different children that were set up, that was descendants of Simon. Those different children those that were set up, Astribulus and so forth, all those different names, which were Israelites. And right after, I would say it was some time. You had Astribulus, you had Astribulus the second. You had a couple of them. And after they kingdom start, as the Hasmonean kingdom started to die down, you end up having Herod taking over. And now that and you've seen it. So it says, having done this, Pompey returned and spent several frustrating years trying to get the Senate, which by now was in the hands of politicians, deeply suspicious of his fame and power, to give land to his veterans, so forth. So we're gonna jump down to this. It says the rise of Caesar. Now we going into the rise of Caesar. And again, when you go, because we gonna get the scriptures, but it's a scripture. I'm gonna wait till I get the scripture, but it's a scripture that I got in mind. It says, at Rome, domestic politics was colored by the continual faction fighting between leading senators, spiced by gang warfare in support of one party or the other. There were also the years in which Marcus Tullius Cicero, the great orator, made his mark. He was consul in the 63 BC, during which he defeated an attempt called the Catalan Conspiracy by a group of impoverished nobles to carry out a coup. Another rising politician, in general, was Julius Caesar, who was elected consul in 59 BC. So now, when you hear about Julius Caesar, you're getting very, very close to the coming of the Roman Empire. It says this: a successful tour of duty as a governor in Spain during his term in office, he negotiated an informal alliance between himself, Pompey, and Crassus. And Crassus was to receive the Eastern Command. He was to receive a command in Gaul, and Pompey was to have the land distribution in favor of his veterans. So you got this going on. You got Caesar coming into play. Okay, so it says in the next few years, Caesar conquered the whole of Gaul and invaded Britain twice, 55 and 54 BC. During this, he acquired an unparalleled reputation as a brilliant general and great popularity with the ordinary people of Rome, but his opponents in the Senate increasingly tried to have him recalled to face trial in various misdemeanors. So here you got Julius Caesar. So now you got Julius Caesar in the play. So it says Crassus was unalive in the east, along with most of his army against the Parthians, 53 BC, at one of the Rome's biggest military disasters, the Battle of Carrhae. And Pompey and Caesar soon fell out. So now you got Pompey and Caesar falling out. So what ended up happening right now? Now you got uh Caesar versus Pompey. So we keep reading. We got Caesar versus Pompey. Now we start to hear about who? Anthony, Octavian. Now Anthony, and when you hear about Octavian, Octavian was one of the group. He was one of the members of a lineage of Caesars. But anyways, so it said this: the assassination of Caesar set the stage for another civil war. The assassins of Caesar fled to Greece, 43 BC, where they set out raising an army.
Hold on 1 second, real quick. I want to read something because before Caesar passed away and got unalive, there was something called the First Triumvirate. So I want to read in on that real quick. So it says, and I don't want to read all this, but I gotta share it. I'm tripping.
Yeah.
Is it this one? Hold on, which one is it? I'm reading from. So it's the second one. Give me a second. I'll pull this up. I want to make this point. All right, so it's this one. All right, so you can see this. You can see the screen.
Con.
All right, so this is in the book about the history of Rome. And as we reading about, you reading about the beef and the empowerment. So I'm just gonna read a little bit. So when you read this, it was going into Pompey, his achievements, Crassus, and like we were just reading to what Aliyah was talking about, unalivings being taking place, right? So I want to read right here. It says where it says Crassus. All right, so we're gonna zoom in. It says Crassus was disposed to become still morally nearly his friend. At length, finding neither of them averse from a union of interest, Caesar had art enough to persuade them to forget their former animosities. A combination was thus formed by which they agreed that nothing should be done in the commonwealth but what received their mutual appropriation. This was called the first triumvirate during the BC of 60 BC. Caesar offered himself for the consulship, and though the Senate were obliged to concur in choosing him, yet they gave him for a colleague Babylas, who, after a slight attempt in favor of the Senate, remained inactive. Caesar shared the foreign provinces of the empire with his confederates. Pompey chose Spain, Crassus, Syria, and to Caesar were left the provinces of Gaul for 5 years. And so, as you're reading down in all this, right, Caesar fought many battles and subdued numerous nations in his expedition into Gaul and Britain, which continued 8 years. He overcame all these different nations. But as you reading here from this first triumvirate, this was called the birth of the Roman Empire. This was during the time of the Roman Empire going into its birth. And like what he's saying about the Anthony guy, the Anthony Edomite, that devil. A lot of this stuff has something to do with him as well. So go ahead, King. I'm going to touch on that, but I wanted to touch on, you know what I'm saying, the first triumvirate, because what you about to go into is the second triumvirate. But I wanted to show them first how the first triumvirate came in.
Con. Beautiful, beautiful. Nice book. But let's keep going. So it says the Marcus. It says Marcus Antonius, Mark Anthony, and C. Octavian, Caesar's grandnephew and adopted son, and Emilus Lepidus formed the second triumvirate, this time a formal one with the specified aim of
Hey, Salaki,
settling.
share your screen, bro.
Oh, Salaki, the water. Time. Formed the second triumvirate, this time a formal one with the specified aim of settling the Constitution, and carried out a widespread purge of thousands of senators and knights in Rome and throughout Italy, distributing the confiscated lands amongst their followers. Anthony and Octavian then took an army to Greece in pursuit of Caesar's assassins and defeated them at Philippi. After Philippi, the triumvirs divided the Roman world between them. Octavian took Italy, Gaul, and Spain, and Lepidus took Africa, and Antony took all the eastern provinces. So here we see it. Here we see this going on. So it says this: the triumvirate almost immediately began to break down when Lepidus proved restive at a small share. Octavian crushed him and stripped him even of that. He then skillfully used Antony's infatuation with Cleopatra, queen of Egypt, to present him as an enemy of Rome's true interests and prepare for war. So now we go into the final round. The final finale came in 31 BC when the fleets of two opposing sides met at Actium off the Greek coast. Octavian won thanks mainly to the generalship of his lieutenant Vespasianus Agrippa, leaving Antony and Cleopatra to sail away and commit, you know what, in Egypt. So that's what happened. That's what happened to Octavian. It says, you said, and it mentions Agrippa. Crazy. So it says, let's stop. Let's stop. Let's go down. Let's go down. So now you got the Augustan settlement. You got the great proconsulate Augustus and Princeps power, summary of Augustan Princeps, so forth, so forth. So this what you hear, and it jumps up to this to say this. Say this right quick. We see the fall. We see the fall of the. We see the fall of the Roman Republic, and this is the time where the Roman Republic had failed. So you have this here. Now you got that. So now you got the rise and consolidation of Imperial Rome. So this is where you hear of what the brother just brought out. The first triumvirate. You hear about that. We were just talking about that. So now we're going into actual the Roman Empire. That's why let's get Imperial Rome. So we're gonna start. We're gonna start here. We're gonna start right here. So it says this. Oh my God! Please don't do that. Okay, the Roman Empire, the ancient Roman Empire, centered on the city of Rome that was established in 270 BC. I mean, not 200, but 27 BC, following the demise of the Roman Republic. We were just talking about that. We went to the rise. We talked about the rise of the Roman Republic. We talked about the fall of the Roman Republic. Now we're talking about the Roman Empire itself. It says the Roman Republic and continuing to the final eclipse of the Empire of the West in the 5th century CE, a brief treatment of the Roman Empire follows for full treatment for full treatment. So it says rise and consolidation of Imperial Rome.
All right, Salaki, hold on real quick. Let me read some, bring something out real quick.
Come.
Hold on. Yeah, let me bring something out real quick. All right, so this is about the consolidation of the imperial power by Augustus. So it says, by the death of Antony in 28 BC, Augustus became master of the Roman Empire. So it says he became the master of the Roman Empire, and he became one of the Caesars, right? He became the second Caesar, right? So let me show you something real quick. It's another book I want to go into. All right. So let's go into this book real quick. This is another book. This is called The Rise of Christendom. And just to show you what race of people this is we're talking about here, because you might be confused, because a lot of people like to say that these people were all Japhetic. So let's prove and put that to bed. So it says The Rise of Christendom. And as you can see, this is page 210. And this book came out in the 1800s. And for the Negroes who want to be deep, your ancestors, my ancestors, all of y'all ancestors, and everybody else who's Israelite ancestors, our ancestors was in slavery when this book was published. But there's just a fact out there. So let's get into this. It says the Chronicle gives an account of the successors of Alexander, Ptolemy Lagos. It is said and placed at Alea, a chief from among the children of Israel, that he might practice the religion of the law. Ptolemy Decanius succeeded, and the commentaries say that he ruled the people of the cavern. At the end of 240 years of the empire of the Greeks, passed to the Romans, to a man who descended from Esau, namely Augustus. I'm going to read that again. Salaki. At the end of 240 years, the empire of the Greeks passed to the Romans, to a man who descended from Esau, namely Augustus. So Augustus Caesar You know what I'm saying? He comes from the same lineage of Julius Caesar, Octavian Caesar. All this, man, is letting you know that what these Caesars that we're reading about in this Roman Empire, they descended from Esau. Letting you know that these people that came from Esau. It says he reigned 56 years, and in the 42nd year of his reign, Isa, son of Marion, was born. So just you know what I'm saying, just a quick fact of FYI, letting you know if you ever want to know what tribe Augustus and them came from, this book letting you know they came from Esau. But back to this book. So it says, by the death of Anthony, Augustus, which was an Edomite, became master of the Roman Empire. He returned to Rome in triumph, whereby feasts and magnificent shows he began to obliterate the impressions of his former cruelty, and this for resolved to secure by his clemency a throne, the foundations of which were laid in blood. He was now at the head of the most extensive empire mankind had ever beheld. Like Daniel said, like our forefather Isaac said, like Moses said, like Ezra said, this will be one of the most powerfulest nations on the earth. The city was inhabited by a concourse from all the countries of the world, and being consequently divested of all patriotic principle. Perhaps a monarchy was the best form of government that could be found to unite its members. The first care of Augustus was to assure himself of the friends of Antony, to which end he publicly reported that he had burned all Antony's letters and papers without reading them, convinced that while any thought themselves suspected, they would be fearful of even offering him their friendship. He had gained the kingdom by his army, but he resolved to govern it by the Senate. So when you look into this, when you go into the imperial power of Augustus, when he came into power, he let everybody know he wasn't dealing with Anthony. He burnt all the letters, right? And he governed everybody by blood, but he also established the kingdom by the power and the mass army he had. But he still tried to run the Roman Empire like a Senate, the same way America does today. And it says, he considered a long time whether he should keep the empire or restore the people to their ancient liberty. But he adopted the advice of Maecenas, which was to continue in power, and he was afterwards swayed by him on every occasion. So now, when you think about this, why was this when he was deciding, hey, should I let everybody go back to their own liberty or keep it how it is? Why did Maecenas tell him to no, keep things like they are, man, continue in power? Because this was of the Lord. It was a prophecy that these things had to be done. And it reads, by the advice of that minister, he became gentle, affable, and humane. He encouraged men of learning and gave them much of his time and friendship. These, in their turn, relieved his most anxious hours and circulated his praise through the empire. And it says, Augustus resolved upon impressing the people with the idea of his magnanimity by making a show of resigning his authority. To this end, he avowed his intentions to the Senate in a studied speech, importing the difficulty of governing so an extensive an empire, but majority received his proposal with pretended indignation. These unanimously besought him not to resign the administration upon his continuing to decline their request. They in a manner compelled him to comply. So, however, he assumed government for 10 years only, but he laid his measures so well that his power was renewed every 10 years to his death. This show of resignation only served to confirm him in the empire and in the hearts of the people. He was now first called Augustus, a name we have hitherto used as that by which he is best known in history. A laurel was ordered to be planted at his gates. Wherever wherever he made his abode, that house was called the palace. He was confirmed in the title of father of his country, and his person was declared sacred, inviolable. So when you look at this, this man was a powerful man and he was a big deal. And I ain't gonna read all this for the sake of time, but it's just letting you know that Augustus one was an Edomite, and when he came in power, he was the one that set up the main rule and set up the Roman Empire the way that it was most famous for, because he had the power to do so. But you got it, bro.
Con, con. No, that was smooth though. I ain't gonna lie to you. It let you know who who them folk is, man. That was
Hey, one
beautiful.
more one more thing while you pulling this up. So the fourth beast, go to Second Ezra 12 and 10 again. Let you know who the fourth beast is. So
Con,
let's let you know this fourth beast is, and letting you know how this fourth beast, that same symbol is letting you know who Esau is on the earth today, man. So it ain't no wavering with us, or ain't no deceiving us or tricking us, trying to make us feel like the Romans, the Greeks, the Americans, all these other people, they ain't nobody more than Esau, man. You know what I'm saying?
con.
Scholars know that, we know that, the Most High know that, and they know that. Most importantly,
No, that's facts though. Facts. Second Ezra chapter 12 and verse number 10. And he said unto me, this is the interpretation of the vision. The eagle whom thou sawest come up from the sea is the kingdom which was seen in the vision of thy brother Daniel. But it was not expounded unto him. Therefore now I declare it unto thee.
come on.
Behold, the days will come that there shall rise up a kingdom upon earth, and it shall be feared above all the kingdoms that were before it.
Go ahead.
In the same shall in the same shall 12 kings reign, one after another.
And this is talking about the Roman Empire and letting you know that the symbol of the Roman Empire would be an eagle. That same eagle, that same empire would descend from the tribe of Esau. Real quick, one more precept, Second Ezra chapter 6 and verse number 9.
Second Ezra chapter 6 and verse number 9. Second Ezra chapter 6 and verse 9. And it reads this. It's like it. Okay, there we go. It says, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth.
So this is also another clear cut letting you know how we know Esau is of the Romans, Americans, the Grecians, the Russians, the Amalekites, all these different nations, the European nations. All we know that these people descend from Esau because they are the ones in power right now. They are the ones, you know what I'm saying, playing a key part in all out World War III. So letting you know that, hey, from that fourth beast was going to come the end of the world. So without a shadow of a doubt, it's lining up with prophecy and precepts and history that these people that we were reading about are Edomites. These 12 Caesars that we're going to go into next week, these people are Edomites. The devil that the Bible speak of, they come from the chief house of Satan. So just keep all that in mind. But that's all I had.
Not facts. So with that being said, we're gonna keep on going. And what I'm gonna do is I'm probably going I'm not gonna read all this, you know what I'm saying, for the information. But it says this. Rise and consolidation of period Rome. And that goes back again to the brother was just bringing out that same thing, right? So we're gonna read this. They just kind of summed it up. A period of unrest and civil wars in the first century BC marked the transition of Rome from a republic to an empire, and we talked about that. How they had those that infighting going on. That infighting going on. You had these senators. They had money. They was doing this. They was doing that. It was a lot. It was a lot going on. Okay, and that's why you end up having the Roman Empire. It says this period encompassed the career of Julius Caesar. We read about him. We read about him in Pompeii. We read about his rise. We read about how him and Pompey was going at it, who eventually took full power over Rome as its dictator after his assassination in 44 BC. And so we read about that. We read about that. Then we read about who was set up after that. The triumvirate of Mark Antony, Lepidus, and Octavian. We read about that. And we're gonna say it says, and Octavian Caesar's nephew ruled. It was not long before Octavian went to war against Antony And we talked about that. How he ended up going to war with Antony. We hear about Cleopatra and all this thing and stuff like that. Antony in North Africa, after his victory at Antium, 31 BC, he was crowned Rome's first emperor, Augustus. Right? His reign from 27 BC to 14 BC. So he was the first emperor. This is the Roman Empire established, was distinguished by stability and peace. All right, so let's go here. Wake up, wake up. You getting, bro?
Come.
Yeah, my computer that's Satan, bro. My computer just froze. Okay, hold on. It's coming back, right? Hold on. My computer, yeah, it just froze, but okay, it's coming back now. Yeah, I can't do nothing right now. It's my computer tripping. Just bear with me. You got it. Hold on. Let me try something. Let me stop sharing. Try it again. So lucky about that. Just Satan, man. Let me try it again. Okay, let's see. Okay. Let's go. Okay, there it is. Dang. Augustus established a form of government known as a principate, which combined some elements from the republic with the traditional powers of a monarchy. The Senate still functioned, though Augustus, as princeps or first citizen, remained in control of the government, with a mind toward maintaining the structure of power entrusted in his rule. Again, so we're reading about the first emperor of Rome. Oh goodness, man, this is crazy. Okay, so again, it says, with the mind toward maintaining the structure of power entrusted to his rule, Augustus began thinking early about who should follow him. Unalive played havoc, Unaliving played havoc with his attempts to select his successor. He had no son, his nephew Marcellus, and his son-in-law Agrippa, and his grandsons Gaius. And you end up going to hear about Gaius alone later, and Lucius, each uh
Predeceased him.
precedes him. He eventually chose Tiberius, a scion of ultra aristocratic Claudia gens, and in the fourth CE adopted him as his son.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is interesting about Tiberius, because we're gonna look to go. Oh, this is freaking upsetting me, man. My computer is tripping, bro. Satan, bro. They never do this.
Come. So we having technical difficulties tonight, man. Satan busy. But what we gonna do is because next week we going all the way into the 12 Caesars, showing it with the scriptures, with the history, the wars that came about it, the timeline and the dates. So most high willing, you know what I'm saying, brothers and sisters can tune in, support, and get edified then. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna go into the 12 feathers and the 12 Caesars next week, if it be the most high's will.
Most I willing, man. That's crazy, yo.
The brother
But
gave up the ghost.
tripping, bro. All right, so all right. All right, so I'm just gonna read this real quick. And we gonna pick up on it. I'm gonna just keep reading. It says, we talked about Tiberius, so I just want to bring out a point for brothers and sisters about Tiberius, and so y'all can see the timeline of what's going on. But yeah, we definitely gonna pick out that. But I just want to share this with y'all, this information. When you hear about Augustus Caesar and things of that nature. So this was around Augustus Caesar. It says reign 27 BC to 80. So his role, he was this during the time when Yahweh Shai about to come on the scene. So I just want to share that information. Says the role Augustus was the first Roman emperor and ruled during the time of Yahweh Shai's birth. He is issued a decree for a census that led Joseph and Mary to Bethlehem, fulfilling biblical prophecy. So you hear about right during the time of Augustus Caesar, who we just read about. During his time, this was the birth of Yahweh Shai. Um, it says his reign marked the beginning of the Roman Empire and brought period to the relative peace known as the Pax Romana, which allowed the spread of Christianity in the following years. Blase, blase. We know they have to do with that. But anyways, Tiberius Caesar, which was the dude that we just read about, who Augustus said that he adopted. Tiberius Caesar, his role, he succeeded Augustus and was an emperor during Yahweh Shai's ministry and his crucifixion. So just want to give y'all a timeline of these emperors and what was going on biblically, who was in play around this time. But you got it, King.
So most high willing, next week we're gonna go over the 12 feathers. We're gonna try to get on a little earlier because we had got on a little later today. You know what I'm saying? Satan been busy. So hey, most high willing, y'all enjoyed the little brief recap and little history that we added on there. So hey, most high willing, man, tune in next week. We're gonna go ahead and deal right into the rise of the Roman Empire and the 12 seizures that came with them alongside the history and with the precepts to back it up. So, hey, man, we pray y'all have a blessed week. Y'all stay in the spirit, stay in the faith,